Hi, everybody. It's Andy and Mark, and we're excited to welcome you to this on-demand webinar on your leadership coaching process as part of the AUCD Leadership Academy. So today, Mark and I want to provide a quick overview of the AUCD Leadership Academy experience. This, we hope, will be helpful, at least for setting the initial context for any coaches who might be watching this webinar with you to get an understanding of the process. We'll talk a little bit about who the participants were in the Academy and sort of our goals and expectations for participants. And then sort of the meat of what we're going to talk about today is in the green. We'll talk a little bit about expectations for the coaching process, both from the perspective of coaches and participants. And we're really lucky to have some previous AUCD Leadership Academy participants who will be joining us to share about their experiences. So with that, we'll give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. So let's start with a quick overview of what the AUCD Leadership Academy experience is like. The AUCD Leadership Academy is a week-long engagement. In current years, it's been virtual, and it's based on a framework from the Center for Courage and Renewal and their Circles of Trust framework for bringing people together to do both community and individual reflection and discernment. And so there's definitely an emphasis on participants' sort of self-awareness of their personal and organizational strengths. We also use a measure called the VIA, or Values in Action assessment, to help participants identify their areas or signature strength. There's a focus on the history of the disability rights and independent living movement, as well as advocacy. And some of that involves in years when we meet in person, going to the Center for Civil and Human Rights here in Atlanta. But in our virtual space, it's involved presentations as well as resources, videos, and other written resources for people to learn more about and be reminded of our place within the disability rights movement. There's a emphasis on sort of building partnerships, networking, community organizing, and this idea of collective impact, how organizations and stakeholders come together to achieve greater and better outcomes for our target populations, whether that's people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, people more broadly, and our societies and our communities that we work in. In addition, you'll see down in the red that the Leadership Academy is informed by some other constructs like linguistic and cultural competence, or humility, universal design for learning. And it's intended to be an experiential process. And so there's less sort of didactic content, although there is an element of that, for introducing key concepts and ideas. Mark, maybe you'd like to talk about the participants?
So yeah, Andy, absolutely. We had 20 participants in the 2020 AUCD Leadership Academy in the intensive week, and they were faculty and staff from University Centers for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities and LEND programs. They were current and emerging leaders in state and national disability organizations. For instance, we had two folks who were working in developmental disabilities councils, and we had an attorney from a protection and advocacy office. And then throughout the academy, we've also had community partners and university partners who are connected to the world of disability in various ways. So it makes sort of the work of thinking about collective impact interesting when people come from different organizational contexts to the academy. And then this next slide is a map that shows the geography of the 2020 cohort. So we had participants from as far west as Hawaii and as far sort of north and east as Vermont. And so if we were to show a map of the first 4 cohorts of the academy, obviously there would be a lot more stars and indications of cohorts of 24 people and 20 people. And we're really proud of kind of the geographical breadth of participation across the academy years, and I'm really proud of the impact that people are making in their organizations to sort of build stronger communities for people with disabilities.
So now that we've talked a little bit about the participants in the Leadership Academy, I want to give coaches just a sense of some of our hopes and expectations for their learning. We're hoping that as part of participation in the Leadership Academy, people will have the opportunity to both think about their personal strengths as well as how those strengths relate to their organizational roles. And through participation, we aim to help people identify strategies for contributing to their organizational identities as well as their organization's accomplishments. As part of this, we ask participants to identify a coach in their home organization or community to serve as a support for implementing new leadership perspectives in their organizations. These coaches may or may not be in a direct supervisory role with the AUCD Leadership Academy participant. And we do ask that the coaching activities not be part of an annual review or evaluative process. So what do we expect for coaches and participants as part of this process? The leadership coaches should be supporting participants in translating the Academy's leadership content and skills into action in their home organizations. And it's probably important to know that Academy participants, as part of the process, identified leadership challenges that they're working on, both within the Academy Intensive Week, as well as with a group of peers in a Learning Ally group. So one of the things might be thinking about sort of those leadership challenges and leadership objectives and goals that the participants have identified, and coaches helping them to work on those, discern strategies and steps forward. And the sort of shape of this work should be that coaches would meet formally face-to-face, ideally, but potentially in virtual settings during this time of pandemic to be safe, up to 6 times in the year following the Academy. So one meeting after this webinar should be used to lay out the schedule and do some planning for the upcoming month's meetings. We'd like there to be 2 observation sessions amongst the meetings, one opportunity for the participant to observe the coach in engaging in leadership practices, and at least one opportunity where the coach observes the participant engaging in leadership roles. And then the 3 additional meetings should be to discuss progress on how the Leadership Academy experiences and content and strategies are being applied in the participants' work setting. We will ask coaches to provide a brief sort of evaluation or feedback of the coaching experience at the end of the follow-up year. And similarly, we'll be asking participants for, as part of our evaluation process, for feedback on coaching. So this is just a potential schedule for coaching. So you can see maybe watching this coaching webinar in March, setting up the first meeting sometime in April to talk about commitments and the times, the observation, one observation in May, a second meeting in June, maybe to discuss that observation as well as sort of progress. Another observation maybe in July, and sometime in September and beyond, meetings 3 and 4, and sort of wrapping up. So we're really fortunate today to be joined by 2 of our former participants in the AUCD Leadership Academy, and I'm going to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves and tell a little bit about their current work. So let's start with Jess.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me. My name's Jess Shetler, and I am the training director at Kansas Lend and the Kansas University Center on Developmental Disabilities at KU Med Center in Kansas City, Kansas. I'm also a licensed psychologist, and I work in our Division of Developmental and Behavioral Pediatrics.
Thanks. And Ray?
Hi, so I'm Ray Washington. I was a part of the 2018 cohort Leadership Academy. One of, I want to say probably one of the better cohorts, maybe. But I was a part of that cohort. I am currently working at the Center for Leadership and Disability at Georgia State University as a research coordinator, and I'm also a licensed master social worker.
Thanks so much. And I think you were both in the same training or
Yes.
Leadership Academy cohort.
So
yes, that's why I felt the need to emphasize that was such a great group.
I would concur with that assessment. So,
well, we are excited to have you both with us today. So Jess, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your experiences with your leadership coach.
absolutely. And my experience was a little bit different because I actually ended up with 2 leadership coaches, thanks to some great guidance from my leadership challenge group facilitator, who helped me kind of think through the multiple roles that I had within my organization. It made sense for me to have sort of a different coach for each of my different roles, which ended up really being a really fruitful experience. And I feel like I learned and grew sort of in both domains and in both kind of spheres of influence that I was a part of. For me, the coaching experiences that I had were really opportunities to take what I learned at the Leadership Academy and to sort of contextualize it to, my sort of home work life and take it back to home base and apply it there with ongoing supportive guidance from my leadership coaches. So through those regular meetings and opportunities for observation and feedback, it created this really nice sort of feedback loop of development where I could have some time for reflection, discussion, kind of carryover of what I had been learning about and kind of focusing my energies towards in the Leadership Academy, and then kind of applying it there in the worlds I was living in and the spheres where I had some influence. So and that growth for me, I feel like continues today and is reflected in the projects and the activities that I'm a part of now, even a few years later. So it was really exciting to see these existing relationships that I had with folks in my organization to really kind of grow together to a new level that I just don't think I would have probably explored in the same way without the experiences of the Leadership Academy.
Great. It sounds like you had, I wanted to follow up on this idea of having 2 coaches. How much sort of flexibility did you feel like you had in sort of crafting the coach process? Obviously One place you did things a little different is to have two coaches. Did you feel like you were able to sort of craft the process to your needs, and maybe a little bit about how you did that?
Sure. Yeah, I definitely felt like I had flexibility and support to craft that to my needs. I had sort of natural opportunities with both coaches to sort of extend our opportunities for check-in off of other types of standing meetings or collaborative types of activities that we were already doing, which I think lent itself to that. And I also sort of, in terms of kind of timing those meetings, I tended to sort of stagger them. So I was sort of meeting with one coach at one point and then the other coach maybe a month later, or sort of at an interval period in between those. My roles are both kind of clinical and then sort of like academic research teaching. And so the opportunities for kind of observation were a little bit different, but we were able to sort of work those out within kind of existing opportunities where the coach we were sort of agree upon that this will be the time that we're kind of doing that observation. I'll be particularly thinking about feedback in that setting. So there were some structures already kind of in place that helped us be able to do that.
Thanks. I'm going to pivot here to Ray and see, if you want to share about sort of your coaching experience and maybe about things that sort of align with what Jess shared, and maybe differences that you see in what coaching was like for you.
Yes, of course. So though Jess had two coaches, I had one coach, which worked perfectly for me. It was an individual who kind of shared a similar role as I, as a young professional kind of working within a youth set, who is half clinical, but then also an administrative like staff individual as well. But I personally sought out someone who did not work directly on any of the projects that I was affiliated with, and someone who I also had admired and saw skills and traits that I kind of wanted to pick up and kind of enhance on my own professional level. And so, it was an overall just great experience and turned out to be more than what I expected. This was one of my first opportunities where I was able to identify someone that I wanted to learn from and learn with, just because it wasn't anyone in a managerial position or supervisory type role. So knowing that I really sought out this person, it also kind of changed the dynamics. And when I reached out to this individual, they were just as eager and intrigued about the Leadership Academy and wanted to learn about my overall experiences and what I was learning. And so it wasn't just me learning from this person, but like we learned together, we learned from each other. And so it was a very just good relationship and bond. And, we met far beyond what was expected of us to meet, in formal and informal ways, so that we could have ongoing check-ins, conversations, share feedback. I was able to observe her in a leadership role, and then she was able to do vice versa and observe me in some of the work that I do. And so that we can actually get a better understanding of the work that we were doing and be able to provide that better constructive feedback that can further enhance a lot of the information and skills that I learned within Leadership Academy. So a very good overall, what seems to be both very pleasing experiences, Jess. So.
Great. I just want to ask one more question, and I'll let Ray go first, and then Jess respond, which is for people who are going through the Leadership Academy who haven't had a chance to start coaching yet, what's maybe one important tip or insight you would want to share with them?
So for me, when I first started thinking about who I would like to identify as a potential coach, I jotted down some things that I felt I would want in a coach and somewhat mentor, right? What were some of those characteristics that I wanted? What were some of the characteristics that I wanted to build upon? Some of my lesser strengths that I wanted to kind of move up the list, and try to think of who I identified with the, being able to possess those strengths as well. And so just kind of jotting that down, brainstorming, not necessarily thinking about a person at first, but more so thinking about the traits that you want that individual to possess.
Great. Jess, what tips do you have?
Well, I would echo everything Ray said. I think that's really brilliant guidance. And I would think too about what are you hoping to gain from the experience? So, where are you hoping for this coaching relationship to sort of take you as far as the next steps in your personal and professional growth in terms of, small, short term kind of skill sets or talents that you want to grow for yourself, as well as um, activities you want to accomplish and kind of next steps that you want this person or people to help you take.
Wow. Thank you both so much. This is really helpful, and I hope and anticipate that it'll be helpful for um, future AUCD leadership participants. Thanks so much for your time. Do you want to do this part?
Yeah. So yeah, Andy, thanks. So just a review of what we discussed. We discussed the sort of shape of the coaching experience for the participants and the coaches. We talked about the expectation that there'll be regular meetings during the upcoming months. We talked about the idea that there will be observation of the academy participant in their context, and an observation of the coach doing something that is significant for the learning of the academy participant. So reciprocal observations, and then the participant, there will be participant generated content at least 3 of the meetings through a video platform, probably because it's pandemic and we want everyone to stay safe. And obviously, if you're doing this process in a place where you feel like it is safe and you can take precautions, if there is a leadership academy goal around increasing skills in a teaching setting, and there's an opportunity to observe teaching or something like that. But we do sort of want to prioritize health and safety of participants and coaches in the process. So that's what we've reviewed.
So this brings us to the end of our on-demand coaching webinar. We've put the contacts for reaching out to us if you have additional questions. And we really appreciate your time today. We just want to leave you with the thought that the most important part of this, and I think this was emphasized by our previous participants, is that this is a flexible process that should be sort of designed and implemented to meet the needs and the sort of learning goals and objectives of AUCD Leadership Academy participants. So we welcome you, your flexibility and creativity in crafting a coaching relationship and interactions that will really help our participants grow towards being the types of leaders that they want to be. Okay.
Thanks.
How's that?
Good.